Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you so much for sharing your lunch hour with us this afternoon. My name is Madeline Jarvis. I'm director of the Two Harbors Public Library and also a board member with the Minnesota Association of Library Friends. On behalf of MELF's programming committee, welcome to Warm Reads for Cold Nights. Here's a thought exercise. Let's just look outside your window and think about those signs that something is coming, those brisk short days and those long cold nights. The leaves are gone and something's in the air. Something's about to happen in Minnesota, and it's that winter magic. And speaking of magic, let's talk about that magic of that great book. That darkness and cold can only touch your windows, and inside you can be anywhere. You could be on a sun-drenched beach, lost in a bustling city, or running from danger in a fantasy realm. The moment when that cold disappears and all that remains is the warmth of the story in your hands, that's what we're here to celebrate today. Warm Reads for Cold Nights is a favorite MELF tradition and customarily our last program of the year, time to coincide with that holiday shopping season. But today's program is just a taste of what we do for and with the Friends of the Libraries all across Minnesota. We know that some of you listening in today are relatively new to our organization, so before I introduce our three special guests, allow me just a minute to share about the Minnesota Association of Library Friends more generally. MELF is a member-driven organization. Our mission, simply put, is to connect grassroots Friends of the Library organizations, offer valuable resources to support their work, and provide a strong voice for friends wherever it is needed. Our programming, grants and awards, and other activities are all geared towards those ends. Visit us at mnlibraryfriends.org for all those details. Most of MELF's webinars hinge around educational topics of particular interest and importance to Friends, such as marketing, fundraising, membership solicitation, leadership cultivation, community advocacy, and more depending on community feedback. And speaking of, as it happens, our board and programming committee are actively working on MELF's slate of events and other offerings for calendar year 2026. We would love to hear from you, our members and partners. Where are you experiencing a need for support? Do you have specific questions about Friends work, or perhaps about nonprofit administration and best practices more generally? We would love to hear anything that you have to share as we structure webinars and workshops intended to offer other information to match those needs. If there's anything you would care to put forward, even if you're not currently a MELF member or if you do not reside in Minnesota, we have created a form to collect feedback and requests. Thanks in advance for helping us help you. And on the subject of membership, I really also want to include a brief plug for MELF membership. MELF's membership year follows the calendar year, meaning that all current members will be due to renew soon. In fact, our membership committee will have renewal notices out within the next week or so, so please watch your email inboxes and your physical mailboxes as well. And if you'd like a head start, or if you're new to us, but today's fun inspires you to join in the fold, you may renew online via the links or QR codes listed here on the slide. Dues are low, just $20 a year for individuals or $35 a year for Friends of the Library groups of all sizes. Libraries and library foundations are also welcome to join at the $35 a year level. Visit our website, mnlibraryfriends.org, for a more complete overview of all the benefits that your membership brings. You can also direct any specific questions to our office at info@mnlibraryfriends.org or give a phone call at 651-366-6492. Okay, enough housekeeping. We're here to talk about books, so let's pivot into those book talks. In a moment, team members from two of Minnesota's preeminent publishers, Graywolf Press and the Minnesota Historical Society Press, will take the stage to showcase highlights from their winter release schedules. I am sure you'll want to take plenty of notes, and I can tell you I am so excited having seen a sneak peek of what we're going to talk about today. Of course, you're welcome to do so, but please know that all registrants will also receive the complete list of books discussed afterwards at the email address that we have on file for you with MELF, along with a recording of today's presentation and a survey to let us know what you thought about today's program. And after we hear from our live guests, Melf will debut an approximate 30-minute montage of winter read recommendations curated for you by a dozen Minnesota writers. Whether you're interested in mysteries, memoir, or a mix of everything, we guarantee you'll come away with a few gift ideas and additions to your own TBR piles. And in that same spirit, please feel free to drop your book recommendations from this past year into the chat at any time. And if we get a substantial number, Melf's office lead, David, will collect these and share them afterwards along with the follow-up items that I've mentioned. Please include both the title and author name in your recommendations, and if it's in a series, just let us know as well. And friends, today our first presenting publisher is Minnesota's own Graywolf Press. Graywolf Press is a nonprofit literary publisher of poetry, fiction, nonfiction, and work in translation. Graywolf Press provides risk-taking, visionary writers who transform culture through literature. Graywolf believes that when writers are free to do their most ambitious work, their books serve as portals to new possibilities and enable deeper understanding between people. Readers are changed by Graywolf's books, which are fearlessly acquired, attentively edited, and energetically promoted. Marketing and Sales Associate Veronica Silva, along with Sales and Operations Director Casey O'Neill, are here today to share their latest. Casey and Veronica, welcome, and please take it away.
Thank you so much for having us, Madeline. We're really, of course, always grateful for what Mouth does, and just so grateful to be here with all of you today to talk about these books. The first of which feels very appropriate to start this warm reads for cold nights with a desert book. So, The High Heaven by Joshua Wheeler, debut novelist. It came to Graywolf with an amazing story of actually being our director's long ago student. And this book is so rooted in the New Mexico landscape that he came from. And what he's done with that landscape and with his ranch upbringing is this incredible story of this one character named Izzy Gently, who really was born and raised on this faraway ranch that housed a UFO death cult, and escaped to this ranching family. This was based on an actual group that Josh knew, and it was part of his community. And what he's done with this story is really take this really singular character of Izzy and follows her life in New Mexico on this ranch, then moves to Texas, and then eventually moves to New Orleans, where there's this amazing instance of these people who experience moon blindness, who can no longer see the moon. And Josh kind of ventures into this kind of magical realist territory. But what I love the most about this book is the way it kind of takes these unlikely characters, these sort of forgotten areas of the country, these really kind of, there's some wild conspiracy theories, there's some really outlandish events, from NASA rocket launches to all these different parts of American history, but makes it both relatable and very, very important, but also very funny. That comp of Dr. No by Percival Everett feels really apt, because Percival Everett's really the only other novelist I know who can be so serious and so funny at the same time. So it's really been one of the most important books we've brought to the Graywolf list this year. It's just out in September, and we're really, really excited to see what this one's going to continue to do.
Thank you, Casey, and hello, everyone. I'm really excited to tell you about I Gave You Eyes and You Looked Toward Darkness by Irena Solá. Irena's first amazing work in translation, which is called When I Sing Mountains Dance, is one of Graywolf's all-time fiction bestsellers and a favorite amongst our staff. This second translation is similarly compelling and surreal. The new novel is set in Spain in an old 16th century mansion, and in that mansion, a woman named Bernadetta is lying on her deathbed, surrounded by the ghosts of women in her family going back 400 years. It has that kind of feminist horror sensibility that we saw with Carmen Maria Machado, and this sense of a long generational curse living in this old house. It's originally written in Catalan, which is a language that has resisted extinction and continues to do so. And you get the sense that the ghosts in this story are used as a way to preserve history and family memory. Um, Graywolf has been publishing a little bit more speculative fiction or horror adjacent fiction, which I think that I am loving, and there's definitely a few other horror fans out there who might be into this one. I think if you have enjoyed Mariana Enriquez or Grady Hendrix, this is one that you might enjoy as well. Um, if you're looking to read fiction from other parts of the world, I think similarly, this might be one to pick up.
And I am excited to talk about Regaining Unconsciousness by Harriet Mullen. And any list of books we put out in any given year, there are of course going to be poetry titles that are really coming to the top that we're most excited about. Harriet Mullen is an author we've published twice before. You'll see Urban Tumbleweed and Recyclopedia. This book has been a long time in the making, which means that these legions of readers she had with both of these books, but Urban Tumbleweed in particular, have just been really excited about new work from Harriet. She's been a formative figure for a lot of really important American poets, and this book really builds on what she's done and explored new ground. Urban Tumbleweed was this beautiful kind of like walking diary and really rooted in LA, but there's a sense of really bringing the quotidian and everyday to life. And there's a really amazing way that Harriet has continued that, and particularly in her fearless way that she's addressing some of the most serious things imaginable: climate change, corporate greed, racist violence, artificial intelligence, pollution of oceans, individualism at the cost of mutual wellness, and really kind of taking an unflinching look at the costs and where this is all leading. And there's really a sense of not shying away from the difficulty of where this ends up. But what Harriet brings is this really singular lyrical humor and some of that attention to the details and the everyday and the play on words and the actual experience of life ends up being this embodied practice through these poems of, given all of this that she's looking at, how do we begin? How do we begin again? Where do we start? And it's she does much more than I can do justice to here. But for this year, for us, if I had to pick one poetry collection, it would be this one.
And next we have Crawl by Max Delson, who George Saunders called a wildly talented, very bold, very funny new writer. This is a debut story collection where every story features a trans-mask character living in 2010 Seattle. We at Graywolf came to know Max when his essay about the joys of playing the video game Hollow Knight was picked by Carmen Maria Machado for our Critical Hits anthology, and we're really glad to now officially be welcoming him onto the list. What I have loved about the story collection and what makes it stand out to me is that while it feels really celebratory and joyful in the way that it portrays queer culture in 2010 Seattle, it definitely does not shy away from some of the darker, grittier aspects. Max is very much interrogating the city's reputation as this radical queer utopia, kind of calling it out as myth or cliche. So alongside the possibility of finding community in the places that Max takes us through in these stories, everywhere from college campuses and music venues to beaches, bathhouses, dive bars, you also get a sense of disdain for some of the creeping corporate influence and the infighting that was present. As you can tell from the cover, it's still a very fun book. Max is a former stand-up comic and is definitely using those skills of using humor to both analyze and critique and entertain all at once. It's a very special book and one that I have enjoyed. So I hope that you will too.
And whenever we have the chance to introduce books like this, it's always geared toward books that are coming out this year. We're always obsessed with what's coming out right now. And I always try to be contrarian to some degree and pick something that doesn't fit in that. And so this time I wanted to talk about The Long Run, A Creative Inquiry by Stacey Durasmo. This came out last year, but it's just one of my favorite works of nonfiction that we put out in a long time. This came about a project that Stacy wanted to publish for a really long time, was this anthology of artists and writers talking about how to sustain a creative career across the long run. And in the process of this, often delayed anthology, and it was Stacy really wanted to find older artists and writers to fill this work. And in the process of that project being delayed, she got older herself. And so what ended up happening is she wrote this book, which is filled with these interviews with amazing writers and artists um, like Thomas Delaney and Amy Sillman, the musician Steve Earle, and a bunch of other writers and artists. But it becomes also a memoir of how Stacy has sustained her career. And I'm always on the lookout for books that we publish in this nonfiction realm that are, maybe have elements of craft, but I think also have elements of the best possible self-help, where you have, you're really collecting what works for people. And there's something really beautiful about the way this book captures all of this incredible wisdom and all these relationships as well. And it's very much about, about these creators who are at the top of their craft, but there's so much that's really relatable and I think really inspiring for those of us who maybe aren't creative at the top of our industry or something, but just it always ends up being about life. And this is one that kind of every chance I have to let people know about in the nonfiction realm, I bring this one up.
And next we have Trigger Warning by Jacinda Townsend. This is the second novel we've published by Jacinda. Her first novel, Mother Country, was very widely loved and acclaimed. And with Trigger Warning, she's exploring a lot of the same themes of motherhood and parenting, but now telling a very different story. So the new novel follows Ruth, who as a child saw her father shot by the police in front of their house. When we meet Ruth, she's in her 40s and has a child of her own. What's really compelling about this book to me is that Jacinda is narrowing the scope of this immense issue of policing and state violence to really hone in on the family at the center, who is the most impacted and also the most forgotten in these conversations. And so we see Ruth kind of struggling with her own trauma, but also primarily the way that her trauma ripples and affects her child. She's learning how to parent a teenager, how to parent a non-binary child, how to parent through divorce and trauma and grief. So it's a very complex and intense novel. But Jacinda has such a propulsive voice that really can guide the reader through. That is a crashed Tesla on the cover, I always like to point out. And the novel does feature this wild cross-country road trip that Ruth takes with her teenager to go find her estranged sister. So it really is kind of about this family finding their way back to each other. And Jacinda has this dry sense of humor and really engaging voice throughout it.
And the last book we wanted to talk about is Natural Order of Things by Danica Kelly. Our publishing relationship with Danica has just been so incredible. She came to us with her debut collection, Bestiary, as the winner of the Canon Prize. And that book ended up being a National Book Award longlisted title. And it was just one of the most lovely and endearing things to have Danica find that out on a morning that she didn't know it was going to be announced. So it was just like this amazing breakfast surprise of just that her debut collection received this national acclaim. And those first two books have really started this trajectory that deals so much with trauma and loss and grief and this real steadfast necessity of looking at the hardest things in life, and the natural order of things arrives in this way that is not only joyful but surprise at the possibility of joy, and in this just completely lovely and kind of pouring forth way that everything about romantic relationships and long-term romantic commitment and the joy of creating art. There's such incredible engagement with the natural world in this. It really is kind of inseparable from the human world, and it's a really spare collection. It's very short. There's a lot of space on the page, but what Danica packs in here, I wanted to end with this as just, again, on that poetry list that Graywolf brings. Just, I think there's never been a time where we need this kind of book more, and there's never been someone who does it so fully and movingly, and in a way that will carry far beyond just the reading of this collection. So we're really just so grateful to have you all here listening to us for a little bit, and that's it from us.
Thank you so much, Veronica and Casey. So many fun things coming up from Graywolf, and in the chat somebody shared, Mother Country was a big hit with my book group. It took us 2 sessions to talk it over. So in addition to the titles that I have on my TBR list from your presentation, that just shot Mother Country up to the top as well. Speaking of which, we had somebody ask in chat, if I can put you on the spot, about how many titles a year does Graywolf put out, and if you had to pick a favorite from your backlist. I realize that this is a really hard thing, but what would your favorite for this moment be right
Oh,
now?
nice. Okay, so 30 to 33-ish, 30 to 35. It's been a little bit closer to 30 titles around the year. And I'll let Veronica go first with the backlist title, and then I'll have mine.
I really want to say Danez Smith is kind of the poet that brought me to Graywolf. So most recently Bluff, which is like very based in the Twin Cities, but also just all of their work was like super influential to me and a big reason of why I ended up here. So.
And my go-to for this time, and I think probably any time I've experienced so far, would be Milkman by Anna Burns, which I was lucky enough to publish. It won the Booker Prize. It's this amazing novel about really the experience of this young woman in Northern Ireland in the late 1970s, though that's unstated. Just kind of changed it was so enjoyable to read and changed my understanding of what a novel can do. Okay, thank you for the questions. And that really is it from us now.
Ah, that's amazing. Goosebumps. And that was Milkman. I'm sorry, will you say the author's name one more time?
Is
And that's me being selfish.
Anna Burns.
Anna Burns. Cool. Awesome. Thank you so much, Veronica and Casey. And friends, our next guest is Riley J. Davis, who's the sales manager with the Minnesota Historical Society Press. MNHS Press is a leading publisher of the history and culture of Minnesota and the Upper Midwest. Books published each year range from adult nonfiction titles to cookbooks to children's picture books. Areas of specialty include Native American history and culture, political and military history, natural history and the environment, cultural and social history, sports, as well as memoir and literary nonfiction. In addition to these titles, MNHS Press maintains the Minnesota History Journal and the free digital encyclopedia Minipedia. Riley, thank you so much for being with us here this afternoon. What would you like to share with us today?
All right, thank you so much for having me. And also, I just need to say that a couple of those Graywolf titles are definitely being added to my own reading list. So thank you, Veronica and Casey, for your presentation. So hello, I'm Riley from the Minnesota Historical Society Press. So let's get started with, oh, I went too far. Of course I did. So our first book. There we go. All right. So our first book I'd like to talk about today is the True North Cabin Cookbook, Volume 2. The last time I did this presentation, I actually presented the first edition, which was the True North Cabin Cookbook written by Stephanie Hansen. That cookbook ended up selling over 10,000 units. We've done multiple printings at this point, so it was a complete hit. So when Stephanie Hansen came to us and she said, I have another cookbook idea, we were absolutely thrilled. So the first edition of the True North Cabin Cookbook really focuses on summer recipes for when you are out at the cabin. The True North Cabin Cookbook Volume 2 focuses on the rest of the year. So this book really is about having attainable and like family, homey, comfort food type of dishes. So here's an example here. We've got the spicy chicken sausage and sweet potato soup and the broccoli cheese soup. It is like soup season. So I'm really excited about trying to take these. These recipes tend to be very attainable. Stephanie Hansen is really like, she was not a chef. She's very much a home cook. You might recognize her from the Jason Show. She does some segments on there about once a week. So she really is just like a very personal person. She's making recipes for people that don't really consider themselves cooks. So if you're looking for like something great for your family holidays, she's full of recipes for that. If you can see, the recipes are organized by month and organized by like what would be the best recipe for that season. So some great ones for October that just passed were this pumpkin spice cream beverage that she makes and the pumpkin spice espresso martini. There's a whole variety of different types of recipes in here. So main dishes, appetizers, desserts. So this is really, really a great cookbook. We've had a lot of great reception to it so far because everybody's able to try these types of recipes. Doesn't require any sort of extremely expensive ingredients or something that you're not going to be able to find in Minnesota. So this is really a like Minnesota centric type of cookbook. Our next book to talk about is Martin Sabo, The Making of the Modern Legislator by Laurie Sturdivant. Laurie Sturdivant has done a lot of books with us. She was previously a writer for the Star Tribune, and she's done other books with us, such as When the Republicans Were Progressive. She recently worked on a Rudy Perpich book with us. And Laurie is very good at talking about politics in a way that is very digestible, in a way that maybe the average person who doesn't really understand politics and how it works and how it operates. But she's really good at making that something that any reader can come to and really understand how this operates. So Martin Sabo was a Minnesota state legislator, representative. He was born in North Dakota, came to Minnesota. He's got a Sabo Center at Augsburg College. So if you know anybody there, you might recognize that name. And he really represents a time in political history when government started to really work. And I know right now that feels very jarring because we are in the middle of a government shutdown. But I think it's very comforting to remember that there have been times where we've been able to make politics work. He was about really being bipartisan and really reaching the aisle to kind of like work with everybody. And he was really huge in helping to balance the national budget at a time when it was very much out of control. So I think this is really good for people that are really interested in politics, really interested in Minnesota history, and really just like want to remember a time when politics didn't look like what they are currently kind of looking like for us right now. So maybe you find some comfort within that. I know I do. Another great book that we just came out with is Becoming the Twin Cities: Swindles, Schemes, and Enduring Rivalries. There's always been kind of a rivalry of Minneapolis and St. Paul as far as I've always known. I'm very much a St. Paul person. I believe in the mantra, St. Paul is where you live, Minneapolis is where you hang out. But there's been a lot of talk throughout history about why are Minneapolis and St. Paul twin cities? Why aren't we just one large metropolitan city? A lot of people, I feel like, know Minneapolis, but then forget that St. Paul is the actual capital of Minnesota. And so this book really kind of goes into how those became divided up culturally, between geography, and also just how a lot of people with money really kind of manipulated the system to get themselves to either St. Paul is where these activities are going to be, and Minneapolis is where these activities are going to be. Who's going to own which land, which infrastructures are we going to build where? And so this really goes into all of those like urban planning details, but in a kind of, there are characters really that get brought forth throughout the book. So it really becomes like a narrative nonfiction in that way. Yeah, we had a lot of really great reception to this past weekend at the Twin Cities Book Festival. So a lot of people found a lot of interest in this one. So I would definitely recommend picking this one up and seeing what you've did it and did not know about the Twin Cities and our history. One of our children's books that has come out this fall is How to Draw a Tree by David LaRochelle, and it's illustrated by Colleen Muskie. So this is a book about how to draw a tree. It feels very self-explanational, but actually this one is a little bit more different than how other like how-to types of books, because this isn't just how to draw a tree in that this you start with a trunk and then you build out the branches and then you draw the leaves. It's not really a step-by-step guide, but this is really more about what is your relationship with the tree and how to build, make a tree based on your perception of it. So this one really invites the reader to experience nature, get to know the tree, rub its bark, what kind of textures do you kind of feel throughout it. There's a whole variety of different types of trees that are represented through this book. So it's got ginkgo trees, oak trees, Joshua trees. So not just trees that you're going to find in Minnesota, but trees that you can really find elsewhere. And it really encourages you to really get to know nature. And then at the end of it, it invites you to, after you've spent some time with your local trees and gotten to know them, to thank it for its help and then start drawing a tree yourself. So this one has also been a really great addition to our collection. David LaRochelle is a former teacher, so this has a lot of STEM type of integration with it. So yeah, this one, I really love this one. Another book that has recently come out from us is The Naming of a Key from Thomas Peacock. You might remember him from one of our bestsellers, The Forever Sky, and then illustrated by Alison Horner. This is the traditional Ojibwe retelling of the first human and the first wolf and how they traveled the earth, which is a key, and named all of the things. So it's really how did the pigs get its name? How did the trees get its name? These two are the people that went around naming all of the things on Earth. So Minnesota Historical Society Press, we really, really pride ourselves on our Indigenous books, and we pride ourselves on having authentic stories from people of that community. And the artwork for this is absolutely stunning. So there's so much color, there's so much vibrancy. It really feels like the earth is coming to life throughout the pages of this book here. So I think it's really just gorgeous to look through, even if your young children aren't readers. I think they're going to really find some enjoyment in just looking at the pictures and seeing what they can see. There's so much detail just throughout it. So there's another photo. So this really also exemplifies the relationship between man and nature. So really about bridging that gap between man and nature that I think like our current society, we kind of see ourselves as separate, but this really brings us back to that true human history. And then coming out in February, we have another cookbook called Dish and Tell, Recipes from the Heart from Sarah Peterson. We are really, really excited about this book because it's not just a typical cookbook, which you'll find a bunch of recipes in, but this is really about bringing together stories. So what Sarah did is she interviewed people not just for the recipes that were important to their family, but also what's the story behind these recipes. And it it does a combination of, you can see the recipe, but then you can also get like the tips and tricks and the kind of like, oh, we use this much butter in order to make this crust turn out this certain crispy way. And then it really invites you to not just try these recipes yourself, but really start to ask your own family members about like, what are the important recipes in your life that you found important to you, and start to write those down and record not just the recipe, but the history behind that recipe. So Sarah really wants to encourage people to start building their own family cookbooks, and for this to be really the inspiration for that. And you'll see that there's a lot of really homey family recipes throughout here. Nothing that's going to be super extravagant, but things that you're really going to be able to replicate and pass down to your next generation throughout there. I really think this one is super cute. You'll
And
also
Riley,
notice.
if I can hop in, could you repeat that author's name for the folks in chat? There's a lot of interest in this, and not just for my own family, I promise.
Yeah, that is Sarah Peterson, and she also runs a blog called Vintage Dish and Tell. So you can find that and kind of get a good little preview for the kind of work that she's been doing. So again, that's Sarah Peterson. Her blog is called Vintage Dish and Tell. Yeah, I really think this one is super cute. So we're really excited about this. This one comes out in February, like I said before, and it's going to have a really great like Mother's Day type of tie-in, I believe. So if anybody is looking for a good gift idea for that, I think this will be great. So, and the last book I'm going to talk to you guys about is another book that comes out in March. And this one is called Pearl's Garden. It is authored and illustrated by Carolyn Olson. You might recognize her work. She did a previous project on essential workers during the pandemic. So she is really excited about this book. She's also a former art school teacher. So all of these illustrations are pastels. So this is a book about a girl named Pearl, and she talks to the city gardener while she's at the community center one day, and she decides that she wants to make her own garden in her own yard. And so the city gardener gives her the plants and is like, you got to do all of the work yourself. And she's like, okay, let's do it. So she tries to ask her family, like, hey, can you guys help me with this garden that I really want to start? And they all have their own activities that they're kind of wrapped up in. So either their theater clubs or their bands or just everyday work. And so her family's like, hey, we're really going to support you in doing this, but we really can't help you with this project. It's going to just be too much work. We're overburdened. And so Pearl takes it upon herself to show her family what kind of fruits of her labor can really come through. So she starts to harvest a couple of the plants herself, and then she makes a salsa. And then once everybody sees like how much work she's going to do for it and how this could also benefit them, they're like, all right, you know what? I can't help out 100% with your garden. It's still your garden, but I can probably give 10% of my time to helping you with one thing. And so then the family starts to kind of work together with her and starts to harvest the garden all together. And this story really is about bringing people together and being able to kind of do a self-inventory on your own capacity for things, but also how you can help and make the world a better place. So another book we're just really excited about. I think this is going to have some great reception. Carolyn plans to be doing a lot of events at farmers markets. So so you can read this book with your kids and then maybe start your own community garden. So thank you so much for having me.
Wow, Riley, thank you so much. And I love that hopeful note that we ended on with Pearl's Garden. And somebody in chat chimed in and said, I feel like we would recognize her illustrations anywhere.
Yeah, she has a very unique style.
So warm and welcoming. And since we asked our friends at Graywolf about backlist, I want to mention we at the Two Harbors Public Library do own the True North Cabin Cookbook, but you would never know that because I don't think I've seen it on the shelf like once. It's just constantly on the hold shelf. So if you had to pick for today, if you were holiday shopping on November 12th and you had one book to buy from your backlist, what would you pick?
Ooh, see, on one hand, that also kind of depends on who I'm buying it for.
Right.
But I think one of the hand sells that I just truly enjoy myself is Red Stained, which is the story of Hilda Sims. And so she was somebody who was an up and coming actress in the Twin Cities, and she was starting to do movies. And then she ended up getting hit by McCarthyism because this is like the midst of the civil rights movement and the Cold War. And during a speech one time, she talked about how the Soviet Union is a little bit better on their race relations than the United States. And the United States, of course, instead of taking a self inventory and being like, hey, let's be less racist, was like, up. Communist. And so she ended up getting her career completely blacklisted. And so it was kind of a lost history that was brought back to life, and talking about like her legacy, her activism work, as well as like her film and theater career. So that one was from about a year ago, and I really love like old Hollywood history. I really like I've been reading a lot about McCarthyism and the United States relationship with communism lately. So it was a really interesting read, and I would highly recommend. It's not a very long book.
Awesome. Thanks so much for that tip. And I did just put Red Stained by Jojo Bell on hold for myself. And I know you're not supposed to judge a book by its cover, but it is so striking and wistful and ominous and gorgeous. And thank you so much.
Of course.
So again, thank you so much, Riley, and thanks again to Veronica and Casey with Graywolf Press. And we so greatly appreciate your time and insights. Between you, I'm positive that we have a reading recommendation suited for absolutely everyone on our holiday book buying lists. Now, as promised, before we wrap up, Melf is going to debut that montage of wide-ranging suggestions from Minnesota writers, after which the webinar will automatically close down. We encourage you to just sit back and enjoy. A list will be provided to you after we wrap, along with the supporting materials already mentioned. And as a final reminder, now would be an excellent time for you to drop your own recommendation in the Zoom chat. And I know in Zoom we're seeing some recommendations coming through for book club reads, which is always exciting. We won't be able to read them here in this moment for the sake of time, but we will make sure that they are selected and shared out with other attendees. So enough chatting, let's get back to those book recommendations. Thanks all and have a great holiday season.
Hello, friends of the library. My name is Amy Lynn Green, and I'm from Burnsville, Minnesota, and I'm here to talk about my fifth novel, The Codebreaker's Daughter. It is my first novel that's set in two different time periods. It's a mother-daughter story, so in the first timeline in World War I, we follow Lillian, who is a member of the first code-breaking team during World War I. And the contributions that actual real historical women made are included in her sections. And then in World War II, we follow her daughter Dinah as she works for the OSS, creating rumors to undermine the Axis powers. It was a joy to write this novel. I got to include themes of mental health and how that was viewed over the decades, as well as lots of real history that we just haven't had a chance to hear before. These women were often overlooked and not included in the history books. So I got to tell their story in The Codebreaker's Daughter, and it was a joy. For my recommendation, really hard to pick something, I went with The Mythmakers by John Hendricks. So this is aimed at a young adult audience. As you can see, it's a graphic novel, but I loved it, and let me tell you why. Because it's about the friendship between C.S. Lewis and J.R.R. Tolkien, whose books I also love. And so it tells some history about how they met, their experiences in World War I, how that shaped their characters. And there's also a lot about legend and myth and how that influenced the fantasy worlds that these two men ended up creating. And so as somebody who wanted to be a writer as a teenager and sometimes felt a little lonely in that, this book would have been so encouraging to see other writers joining together and giving each other feedback, as well as the joy of the worlds that they were building. So for teenage Amy and for all the other ones out there like me, I would suggest adding The Mythmakers to your collection. Thank you.
Hello, my name is Annika Fajardo, and I'm the author of the novel The Many Mothers of Dolores Moore. This is a book for people who like stories of travel and a tiny bit of romance and a lot of family. It is about Dolores Dory Moore, who is unemployed, single, and alone when the story starts. Her mothers have died, and they have made her promise to return to her birthplace in Colombia, where she was born and where both of her parents died. And although Dory is a cartographer, she has never traveled. She's never used her passport before. And this is the chance for her to take the trip of a lifetime, reconnecting with an old flame who volunteers to cat sit her mother's two orange tabbies that are left behind. She is propelled on an amazing trip to Colombia, where she gets to know both people from the country, other people who have found their homes there, and she gets to learn more about where she came from. If you like family stories and stories with a little bit of magical realism, you might like my new novel, The Many Mothers of Dolores Moore. When I'm picking up a book, one of the more recent ones that I've been reading is Sonia Manzano's memoir, Becoming Maria. If you grew up watching Sesame Street like I did, you might recognize Sonia as the character of Maria, who has taught so many of us growing up about living life and about being patient and about being kind. And in her memoir, she tells the story of growing up in the Bronx and growing up fighting racism and lots of different challenges. And the very end of the book is the beginning of her career in Sesame Street. So if you like memoirs and if you're a Sesame Street fan like I am, take a look at Sonia Manzano's memoir. Thanks.
I'm Lori Sturdivant, a retired editorial writer for the Star Tribune. I hope you'll consider my latest book as a gift to yourself or to anyone who's concerned right now about the condition of American democracy. It's Martin Sabo, The Making of the Modern Legislature by Minnesota Historical Society Press. Martin Sabo was among Minnesota's longest-serving elected officials. He spent 18 years in the State House and 28 years in the U.S. House. He enjoyed considerable success in both settings, but this book argues that his most significant contribution to our shared lives in Minnesota came when he was first Minority Leader, then Speaker of the Minnesota House in the 1970s. He arrived at the Minnesota House in 1961 and found an old-fashioned, hidebound legislative body that met only 3 months every other year. He resolved then to make service in government's legislative branches his life's work, and then he was in the thick of the changes that made the Minnesota legislature more representative, more innovative, and more influential in the lives of Minnesotans. His story puts the lie to the idea that Americans aren't well served by career politicians or that the legislative branch of our government is hopelessly ineffective. Martin Sabo showed that neither of those things is true. When Martin wanted a break from politics, he turned to sports, particularly baseball. He and I had that in common. Before he died in 2016, I often chatted with him at Minnesota Twins games. I think he'd love the other book that I'm recommending today. It's The Franchise, A Curated History of the Minnesota Twins by longtime Minnesota Star Tribune sports writer Lavelle E. Neal III. It was released last year and is published by Triumph Books in Chicago. Neal's book nicely weaves the story of the Twins, a 65-year-old Minnesota institution, the franchise, with vivid profiles of some of the Twins' greatest players and personalities. The club's legendary stars, Killebrew and Puckett, Oliva, Carew, they're all there, as are our hometown heroes, Herbeck, Molitor, Winfield, Maurer. Neal is an exceptional writer who knows his subjects very well, so his essays are warm and witty and full of nuggets that I think would surprise and delight even the most knowledgeable fan, maybe even Martin Sabo. Happy shopping and happy holidays.
Hi, my name is John Coy. I'm lucky enough to be coming to you from the banks of the Mississippi River. I've got a leaf and I've got a book called The Secret of Fall with beautiful art by Kristen Adam that explains something about our leaves, and I hope once you read this book, you'll have a new way of looking at the colors of fall. It's Minnesota, so you know what's coming. So Cold is just around the corner. This book was so much fun to work on with local illustrator Chris Park. Chris did just spectacular pictures for it, and it's got some fun activities to do when it gets so cold. The new book I would like to recommend is called Revolutions Are Made of Love, the story of James Boggs and Grace Lee Boggs, and it's written by Sun Young Shin and Melina Mengal. Both of them are from Minnesota, and so is Leslie Barlow, who did spectacular art in the book. It's really a terrific book, and I hope you will check it out. Again, Revolutions Are Made of Love. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Stephanie Hansen, and I'm the author of the True North Cabin Cookbook, Volume 1 and Volume 2. I'm also the host of the Emmy Award-winning cooking show, Taste Buds with Stephanie. And True North Cabin Cookbook, Volume 1 is a collection of all of my favorite recipes from the Midwest that you might make during cabin season. It also tells the story of my beloved Northwoods home on Burnside Lake in Ely, Minnesota. The book is organized by month. So the summer book has the May through September recipes. And then in September, the book just came out that has the October through April recipes. So think cabin, cozy, the holiday recipes are in here. It is easy, tasty recipes that you can make at home. And the book that I want to recommend to you, coincidentally, is also a book that's about canoeing. This book is by Kurt Johnson and Ellie Johnson. It's a father and daughter duo, and they wrote a book about Ellie's journey in the Thalon River in a canoe with 3 other young women. Of course, something terrible happens at the beginning of the book, and then there's a lot of drama that ensues, but it is a really beautiful book. It is a coming-of-age story. It is also a story that is maybe familiar to people in the Midwest that like canoeing and going into the Boundary Waters. It's also written by my husband, Kurt Johnson, and my daughter, Ellie Johnson. And the way that the book came about was she was at college and they would talk about this trip that she took in her high school years. And he decided that he should fictionalize it and make a book out of it. But so there's these really vivid descriptions about what it feels like to be canoeing in the Thalon River, what it feels like to be 45 days in the wilderness and not speak to anybody. It's a beautiful book. I love it. It won the Minnesota Book Award in 2022, and you should check it out. So those are my book recommendations from Stephanie Hansen of stephaniesdish.com.
Hi, Minnesota Association of Library Friends. My name is Megan Maynor, and I have a few book recommendations for you. So the first one is my new picture book. It's called It's Taco Night. It's written by me, it's illustrated by Estrella Lorenzo, and it's published by Clarion Books. And this is the story of a land where the villagers are served every evening by the knights of dinner. So it could be pizza night, or pasta night, or soup night, or on occasion, the night of leftovers. And things are all kind of humming along well enough in this land until Taco Night comes to town. And Taco Night thinks he's the best and gets a little carried away trying to make every night Taco Night. And eventually he has to learn about the value of variety. So this is a fun and silly book. It's a little goofy. I think kids enjoy the over-the-top nature of these characters, of Taco Night in particular, and thinking about their own favorite dinner nights. And adults kind of relate to having to deal with dinner night, like every day. So that's It's Taco Night. I hope you will enjoy it. And I have another recommendation for you, which is Snow Steps. By another Minnesota author, Karen Lachena Kenny. It's illustrated by Irina Augustanovic, and it's published by Worthy Kids. And this is the story of our main character, Lakshmi here, who, like Karen, is new to Minnesota from Guyana. This was true for Karen when Karen was little. And she's not so sure about the snow. She is missing home, which was warm and had different plants and flowers and different food, and she's not sure about this cold, hard snow. But eventually enticed by seeing some kids sledding and wanting to connect with a new friend, she eventually feels brave enough to take her first steps in this new place that she lives, her first snow steps. So highly recommend Snow Steps. Also recommend It's Taco Night. I hope you will enjoy them both, and happy holiday reading. Thank you.
Hello, my name is Steve Huffbeck. I'm a Minnesota-born and raised historian and author, and I've written a new book here in 2025. It's about the legend of the 1st Minnesota Volunteer Regiment at Gettysburg. Colville Smiled, which is an odd title for a book, but it's the story of William Colville, Minnesota's greatest ever Civil War hero. And we know him because he's got a statue in Cannon Falls, 8 feet tall, and in the Minnesota State Capitol, 8 feet tall. And he was a giant of a man, 6 feet 5. He came from Red Wing. He was born in the year 1830 and 1861. He was 31 years old. And at the Battle of Gettysburg in 1863, the 1st Minnesota Regiment was in a desperate situation. The rebels on July the 2nd, 1863 were advancing. The U.S. troops were in retreat, and William Colville and the 262 men of the 1st Minnesota Regiment were ordered by General Winfield Scott Hancock. He asked, "What regiment is this?" And Colville said, "1st Minnesota Regiment," and he said, "Charge those lines." It was a desperate thing for the 1st Minnesota Regiment. And the oddest thing is when he got the order and he said, "Charge," Colville smiled. And so I asked myself the question, why did he smile? And so this is the book, 2025, for your consideration. And it's heavily illustrated, 225 pages, 61 illustrations. And a book that I would recommend for you is written some years ago. It's called Little Minnesota in World War II, written by Jill Johnson and Dean Johnson. And you might consider that one as. So that's the word from Barnesville, Minnesota. Have a good day. Thanks. Bye.
Hi, my name is Kata Schwain, and this is Quimby. And first of all, I just want to say thank you to all of you who are on Friends boards across the state. What you do is nothing short of magic for our libraries and our communities. As a former member of the Friends of the Northfield Public Library, I know what kind of magic all of you do behind the scenes, and I'm so very grateful. So thank you. The book I want to recommend to you is one maybe lots of you have heard of already. It's called Small Things Like These. It was published back in 2022. It is just such a perfect tale of a small town in Ireland in 1985. It tells a story of one man and his contribution to that community in prose that is just simply magnificent. It also is the perfect book where when you have that one holiday afternoon where you can just sit and curl up in a chair and read for 4 hours, you can just finish this book in one sitting, and it's just beautiful. So highly recommend. And then my own book is called The Gospel of Salome, and it is biblical historical fiction with some rather revolutionary twists. If you enjoy strong female protagonists, if you enjoy women who practice medicine, if you enjoy exploring ancient times, this is a book for you. It's also a book for you if, like me, you're someone who is a person of faith who has always felt more at home in the questions than the answers. Yeah, this book is for you. Happy holidays. Bye.
Hi, Minnesota Association of Library Friends. My name is Erin Soderberg Downing, and I am a children's book author based in Minneapolis. I'm here to tell you about two books that I loved this year. The first happens to be one that I wrote. My newest novel is called What Happened Then, and it came out in September. This is a middle grade mystery set on an island, based on a real island up in Rainy Lake in northern Minnesota. But in this book, two cousins named Avery and Jax are called out to this old family island at the beginning of the story. No one has been here in years. No one ever talks about this place. And these two cousins start to wonder, why have we never been here? Especially when they find out that when their parents were kids, they used to spend a month out on this island. Well, they soon realize that one of the kids in their parents' generation died as a kid, and they begin to realize it may have happened on this island. And so when they get there and they start digging through this island and all of the contents and getting the place cleaned up and ready to sell, Avery and Jax start to find some pages of an old diary that they realize was probably written the last summer their parents' generation was out here. And maybe if they can find all of the pages of this diary, they can start to put together the puzzle of what happened then. What happened that summer that completely destroyed this family and has remained a secret ever since. So I love this book. It's the best book I've written. But I also wanted to share a book by another author whose books I always like, but this is my favorite of hers. This one's called The Trouble with Heroes by Kate Mesner. It's about a boy named Finn who vandalizes a graveyard at the beginning of the book. And instead of a traditional punishment, the daughter of the woman whose grave he vandalizes offers him an alternate punishment, which is he can hike all 46 of the Adirondacks high peaks with this deceased woman's dog in tow. It's a novel told in verse. There's humor, there's a lot of sadness, but most importantly, there's a lot of healing thanks to the power of nature, which is one of my favorite themes. I love this book. I love seeing a different part of the world or different part of the country and nature that is feels very similar to Minnesota, but also incredibly different. So I hope you check out this book, and I hope you have a great year of reading ahead of you. Thanks for inviting me.
I'm Stephanie Lansom, and I have two books to tell you about. The first is my novel, The Fault Between Us. This is my sixth historical novel and one that's really special to me. It's inspired by the real heroes and heroines of the Hebgen Lake earthquake that shook Yellowstone National Park and brought down a mountain on August 17th, 1959. It's a suspenseful tale of sisterhood and resilience wrapped up in a fast-paced historical disaster. And it's all based on real historical events of this little-known but devastating earthquake that hit in the dark of night during the height of the Yellowstone tourist season. This book is particularly dear to me because my mom and dad and my mom's sisters lived in Yellowstone at the time of the earthquake. I incorporated their experiences on the night of the quake, as well as lots of our family lore, starring bears and snakes, horses, and even a bar brawl about a baby that landed my dad in jail. The other book I wanted to tell you about is called Frogness. It's by a lovely friend of mine and Minnesota children's author, Sarah Nelson. All of Sarah's children's books are wonderful, but this one is my favorite. The writing is lyrical and whimsical, and the illustrations by Eugenie Fernandez are delightful. You can see. It's a book children will want to read over and over, and you'll want to do the same. So it's the perfect book to give to children in your life. Wishing you many hours of happy reading.
Hello, I'm Juliana Brand. I'm an author from the Twin Cities, and I write middle grade stories that are filled with whimsy and magic and heart. And today I get to talk about Exit Nowhere, my book that came out recently, and it just released in paperback. And this story is about a group of kids who are set to the task of researching a local landmark at school. And of course, they pick an old mansion that's in town. So as kids do, they decide that they need to sneak into it at night night to do some research. And when they walk inside, all of the doors lock. And it turns out that the house is haunted and the ghost wants to play spooky games against them. So this story has a lot of old childhood favorite games like The Floor is Lava and mazes and all sorts of things. Ghost in the Graveyard comes in, of course. And the kids, the only way that they can figure out how to escape is to beat the ghost at its games. And I am here to also recommend to you another book. And I am recommending Tuck Everlasting by Natalie Babbitt. This particular story, though, is very special because this is the graphic novel, and this is adapted by Kay Woodman Maynard, and this is gloriously beautiful. This was released for the 50th anniversary of Tuck Everlasting. So all of the story, the whole story is Natalie Babbitt's Tuck Everlasting, but the adaptation is done by Kay, and it is absolutely phenomenally stunning, where she has all of the text, the same text and conversations that characters are having with the themes of grief and of everlasting life all woven into the illustrations, and it is heartbreaking and beautiful and glorious. Highly recommend checking it out. It is a beautiful, beautiful story that Kay has created in her lovely watercolors of Natalie Babbitt's story. So, bye.
Hi, I'm Loretta Ellsworth. I'm the author of The Jilted Countess, historical fiction that comes out in January of 2026. It's based on the true story of a Hungarian countess who falls in love with a Minnesota soldier shortly after World War II while he's in Europe. He proposes and she accepts. Her family has lost everything during the war. It takes a couple of years for her to come to the U.S. When she finally arrives in 1948, she finds out that he has recently married someone else. She's devastated, and she doesn't want to go back because Hungary is under communist control. But she only has 2 weeks left of her visa before she will be deported. So she goes to see a newspaper man at the Minneapolis Star-Tribune, tells him her story. He decides to put her picture in the paper along with a fake name and asks if any returning soldiers would like to help her out by marrying her. So she's basically the first bachelorette. She receives almost 1,800 offers of marriage, and in 2 weeks she selects a husband, settles in a small Minnesota town, and is never heard from again. So what a wonderful idea for a story. So I created the rest of the story for this countess as to what happens after she is married. And I hope you'll take a look at it. The book I would like to recommend is by Heather Gudenkauf. She's an Iowa author and she writes thrillers. And this is her recent one. It's The Perfect Host. I like to read a lot of different genres. I enjoy historical fiction, but I also enjoy thrillers that have a lot of suspense, and this is one that she always writes good books, and I hope you'll take a look at this as well. Thank you, and thank you for having me.
My name is Mwanga Kalimamkwento. I am the author of Another Mother Does Not Come, a collection of poems and essays that was published by Wayfarer Books in April of 2025. My book recommendation is The Evidence of V by Sheila O'Connor, which is a collection that includes fragments and photographs and poems, fictions, and some research. And I always return to it because I admire her bravery in exploring multiple storytelling forms in completing that book, and it is such a work of art and will always be my book recommendation.